Okay, welcome back to Peak. I'm going to read chapters 3 and 4. We're still working on this first assignment that I had given you, so we'll do this for the first two videos. You can use the first two videos to do this assignment. You saw it in the first video. I'll show it to you again at the very end of this reading. All right, so let's start chapter 3. Peak, chapter 3, it's called A Couple Stitches and the Slammer. When I stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, I was shocked by the swarm of reporters with flashing cameras. How did they get here so quickly? He's just a kid. What's your name? He's bleeding. Why did you do it? Did you make it to the top? I didn't answer any of the questions. In fact, I barely looked at them. The whole point of a spectacular tag is not the artwork, it's the mystery of how it was done. A subway rider goes by the same 17 abandoned freight cars parked on a sidetrack, week after week, year after year. Then one morning, all 17 of them have been tagged top to bottom with wild, beautiful graffiti. Or a driver in a bumper-to-bumper traffic drives under the same overpass 1,000 times, barely noticing it, until the morning, the entire span is painted day-glow orange and green. How did they do that? Scaffolds in one night? How many of them were there? Where were the cops? What's the point? It's the mystery. That's the point. And there isn't enough of it, in my opinion. My little blue mountains were small, but I made up for their size by putting them in audacious places where they might never be seen except by a bored office worker or window washer. This was my 6th skyscraper. I had planned to do 9 altogether. Why? Oh, I have no idea. Now everyone would know how I did it. The mystery was gone, and that was the worst part of getting caught. Or so I thought. I expected my mom to show up at the emergency room and tear off my left ear, but she didn't. And it turned out that my right ear was still attached to my head, as was most of my cheek. The East Indian emergency doc took a look at my face under the light for a minute or two. Then he asked me how it happened, eyeing the 2 cops standing in the doorway as if they were the ones who had messed me up. My face froze to a wall? You should have used lukewarm water to unfreeze it. Yeah, if I'd had some handy, I would have. I'm going to clean it up and put in a couple of little stitches. I was out of there in less than an hour. The 2 cops drove me to the police station and put me in the filthy room with a 2-way mirror. I didn't look so hot. I didn't feel so good either. My head throbbed, my arms and legs ached, and I had 4 fingernails split all the way down the middle. It felt like someone had lit them on fire. The emergency doc hadn't even bothered to look at them. After what seemed like 2 days, the door opened, and a tired-looking detective in a rumpled suit came in carrying my backpack and a thick file. He dumped the contents of the pack on the table, and he went through everything piece by piece. When he finished, he scooped the stuff back in. Then he looked at me, and he shook his head. You messed up, Pete. It's Peak, I said. Like in Mountain Peak? Yeah, right. Weird name. Yeah, weird parents. Yeah, I just talked with your mother. She said that I had her permission to beat you to death. Yeah, good old mom. I got another phone call, he added. It was the mayor. I've been a cop for 35 years, and I've never gotten a personal phone call from the mayor. He's upset. Turns out he was at the reception in the Woolworth building. They thought you were a terrorist, but it's pretty clear now that you're just a moron. He stared at me, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I was a moron. I should have checked the building's evening schedule more carefully before I scaled it. The reporters hadn't rushed over to snap photos of me. They were already there for the mayor's reception. And so were the cops. They'll take you over to JDC in a bit. Yeah, what's JDC? I hadn't been arrested before. The Juvenile Detention Center? You'll stay there until you're arraigned. I wasn't really sure what that meant either. And the detective must have sensed this because he explained that there was a separate court system for juvenile defendants. The district attorney would decide what the charges would be, and I would have to go before a judge and plead guilty or not guilty. Then they'll let me out, I said? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Depends on how much the bail is or whether your parents can cough up the dough. Or they might deny bail altogether, which means you'll be in JDC until your trial or sentencing date. That could be months. The courts are backed up. Oh, my mouth went dry. I haven't been in trouble before, I said. You mean you haven't been caught before? The detective opened the file folder and he spread out 3 photographs on the table. We've been tracking these tags for quite a while now. Looks like we caught the tagger red-handed. The photos were grainy, obviously taken with a long telephoto lens, but the blue stenciled mountains were clear enough. 2 uniformed cops were waiting for me outside the interrogation room along with my mom, who was so mad she could barely even speak. She looked at the bandages on my face and managed to ask if I was okay. Yeah, I'm fine. We've got to take him to JDC, ma'am, one of the cops said. Mom nodded, then looked at me. We'll see what we can do, Peek, but you've really done it this time. And the cops led me away. By the 3rd day at JDC, I was climbing the wall, literally, until my counselor, that's what they call the guards here, told me to stop. Hey, Spider Boy, Fly Boy, Gecko Kid. That was all front page news every morning. Each article dug deeper and deeper into my family's past. My mom, dad, stepfather, even my twin sisters were targets. There were infrared photos of my clinging to the skyscraper, photos from school, photos of my mom and dad when they were rock rats, and my other 2 Blue Mountain tags had been discovered. I stopped reading the newspaper accounts after the 2nd day, and I left the common room when the news came on the television. They limited our phone calls at JDC. I was only able to catch Mom once to ask her what was going on, but she was meeting with the attorneys and she didn't have time to talk. On the morning of the 4th day, my counselor came into my room, that's what they call the cells, and said I had a visitor. Finally. I was pretty disappointed to see it was Vincent in the visiting room instead of my mom. No offense, Vincent. He looked a little shocked when he saw my scabbed over face and ear. I brought some books for you to read, he said, pushing a couple of paperbacks across the table. I imagine it gets a bit boring in here. Yeah, thanks. I also brought along a couple of moleskin notebooks. He took 2 black, shrink-wrapped notebooks out of his bag and he set them on the table like they were sacred texts. They are made in Italy. Van Gogh, Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, Bruce Chatwin drew or wrote in moleskins. Oh, really? I guess I'd better tell you a little more about my school. It's a special school. In fact, so special that it doesn't have an official name. It's simply known as the Green Street School, or GSS, because that's the street it's on. There are 100 students, kindergarten through high school, from all over Manhattan. Most of the kids are prodigies, meaning they play music, sing, dance, act, solve math problems computers can't solve. And me, who can't do any of these things, I got in because my stepfather, Rolf Young, he's on the advisory board and he does all of their legal work pro bono, meaning for free. The school is 2 blocks from our loft and my twin sisters go there too. But unlike me, they deserve to be there. They are both piano wizards. It took them a year to figure out my talent, which I think they just made up so Rolf would continue to do their stuff for free. Peek is our writer, the headmistress declared one day, holding up an essay I'd scrawled out the morning as I gulped down a bowl of cereal before leaving for school. I would have preferred to be their climber, but GSS doesn't recognize sports as a worthy human endeavor. Don't get me wrong, I like GSS. The students and teachers are a quirky bunch of wildly entertaining. I've even managed to learn some things there. The problem is that I don't have any friends at the school. This isn't anyone's fault, really. My main interest is climbing. The other students are interested in things like number theory, what kind of gut to use on their violin or cello bows, and painting techniques. Anyway, this is how I got hooked up with Vincent. As the school's English teacher, he got stuck with the job of mentoring the alleged writer. He unwrapped one of the moleskins and he showed me how there was a little pocket in the back to store notes and how the elastic band stretched to mark your place or hold the notebook closed. I brought you a pen, he said, but they would not let me give it to you. They were afraid you would write on your wall with it. I think they were probably more afraid that I would use it to stab somebody, or more likely, somebody would take it away and stab me with it. I will see what I can do about getting you something to write with, Vincent said. He always spoke slowly, enunciating each word precisely, and I had never heard him use a contraction. Some of the best literature ever written was composed inside prison cells. I didn't plan on being at JDC long enough to compose anything. Whether you come back to school or not, you can still complete this year. I have talked to the headmistress. 4 other authors and I will evaluate you by your words that you put in this notebook. Evaluate meant graduate at GSS. I brought you 2 moleskins in case you write a longer piece. It must be a story, not a diary or a journal, with a beginning, a middle, and a denouement at the end to tie the story together. The story can be based on your life, someone else's life, or events completely from your imagination. You only have to complete one of the moleskins to fulfill your requirement, using some of the writing techniques I have taught you during the past year. Oh, I'm coming back to school, I said. He didn't look like he believed me. Regardless, he said, the assignment will remain the same. Later that morning, I had a second visitor, a woman, long brown hair, pale blue eyes, olive-colored skin, carrying a garment bag. She was short but powerfully built, with good muscle tone in her arms. Aside from a slight stiffness in her back, which you wouldn't have known if you didn't know her, the only flaw she had were her hands. They were scarred from years of climbing. Sorry I couldn't get out here sooner, Mom said. With the twins and the attorneys and... That's okay, I interrupted. JDC was at least an hour-and-a-half drive from our loft in Manhattan. In addition to everything else, Mom worked full-time in a bookstore she and a friend owned. Still, I would have liked to have seen her before this. She walked over to where I was sitting and looked at the scabs on my face. That's ugly, she said. Yeah, thanks. She started pacing. How are the twins? They haven't stopped crying since you got busted. I winced. It was one thing to upset my mom, but I didn't like upsetting Patrice and Paula. 2 peas in a pod, as Mom and Rolf called them, or pee-pee, as I called them, which always made them giggle. They were 6 years old and looked up to the third P, which is me, like I was a god. You've really done it this time, Pete. 6 skyscrapers? They're going to eat you up and spit you out. Rolf has cashed in every favor he has in the city, and I don't think any of it is going to work. He got your arraignment delayed, and he tried for a second delay. I had seen my mom agitated before, but I had never seen her like this. She was pacing the small holding cell like a caged leopard, hoping that the publicity would die down. But after last night, that's all down the tubes. The district attorney, who Rolf went to school with, and the judge, they nixed that idea. Wait, I said. What happened last night? She stopped pacing and she glared at me with her mouth open and her eyes wide. You didn't hear. I shook my head. A boy fell from the Flatiron building. He's dead. I stared at her. What is that at? To do with you? She yelled. It's because of you, Pete. The boy had all your news articles pinned up in his bedroom. He had He had a can of blue spray paint in his pack. He had never been climbing in his entire life, which explains why he only made it up 75 feet. But the fall was enough to kill him, and enough to keep you in jail for the next 3 years. What? I was on my feet now. Unbelievable. She let out a harsh laugh. You're circling the drain, Pete, and you don't even know it. Circling the drain, a term from our past lives out west. I hadn't heard it in years. What do you mean, 3 years? And 3 months, she said. That's when you'll be 18. I started pacing now. All I did was climb the Woolworth building. I didn't brag about it or post it on the internet. It was my little secret. My way of, well, I didn't know exactly why I had done it. I felt bad about the other boy, but it wasn't my fault. Did you tell Dad? I asked, meaning my real dad, not Rolf. This elicited another harsh laugh. Yeah, he's in Nepal. I left him a message with a Sherpa who barely spoke a word of English. I'm not even sure why I called him. I guess it was desperation. She took a deep breath. Look, I have to go. Rolf and I are meeting with the attorneys. Attorneys? I thought Rolf would be my attorney. 2 of them. Rolf can't represent you. He's your stepfather. That's a conflict of interest. Do you think? Her whole demeanor changed when she noticed how scared I was. She softened, and her pale blue eyes filled with tears. I hope so, Pete, she said quietly. But I'm not optimistic. The city wants to make an example out of you. She turned away and she wiped her eyes. Then she handed me the garment bag. This is a suit. You'll have to wear it tomorrow. And I talked to them downstairs. A barber is going to come in and cut your hair sometime this afternoon. I sat down heavily in the chair. Buck up, she said with strained cheerfulness. I don't think he'll butcher your hair too badly. You've got to look like you're... I'm not worried about my hair. I'm worried about those 3 years. I'm already going crazy in here. I can't... It all hit me at once. The climb, the arrest, the kid falling from the Flatiron Building. And I broke down, and my mom just held me. All right, there's chapter 3. You got a little better look there at Pete as a character and the hook to this story. So write me a couple paragraphs and send it to me on a Google Doc.